Today, finally, the screen key that you see here at the top right of the screen will actually be useful. Because you're gonna be seeing actions which are wild. First of all, I wanted to show off, I actually got a new font. I've been on JetBrains Mono for a really long time. I used to say about it, it's like, it is unfortunately the best font, I said, because every other font had some sort of glaring issue. But I got recommended this font called Input Mono. Input Mono, like that. I actually like it a lot. First time I changed it, enabled it, my head was hurting. Like, it was overstimulating, I guess. Whatever the correct word would be for this. It was hard to look at, but I realized immediately that I liked it a lot. It looks really goofy. I mean, just look at it. It feels so like, what the hell? The cool thing about it is that it is fatter. It is more wide than fonts generally are. This is still very much a rectangle, but is far more square than I had JetBrains Mono. What this allows is that borders, whenever you see them, actually look a bit better because they feel a bit more square rather than the usual case of the vertical bar being very vertical, and then when it needs to be like this, it is instead like this, because vertically a cell in a terminal is bigger than it is horizontally, because of which I really dislike borders and NeoVim and overall in TUI programs. With it being a bit like a bit more square than usual, they look a bit better now, which is really great. But then also, look at the tilde. It is so goofy. It is ridiculous, but I love it so much. Then, stuff like the semicolon looks very... I'm not sure how to... It looks like the icon of that movie, like that cartoon movie. The something super family, where the guy is strong, hi Gon. The woman is stretchy, which is hilarious to say. The kid is speedy, and the girl is weird. I forget the movie name. So yeah, the semicolon kind of looks like that. Then this is, believe it or not, the backtick. I didn't get it initially. It looks kind of surprising, but I do enjoy it. It's far more visible than usual. Dots, like period, is way more like clear, as well as the comma, which I enjoy a lot. Let's go look at some actual code. And here you can see just how much they stand out. Everything looks more cartoonish in a way, and periods are far more clear, far more loud than they usually are. Same thing about single quotes and double quotes. Everything just stands out more. It is called Input Mono. It is a weirdo font for sure, but I actually enjoy it very much. So because of it being fatter, that also means that you can fit more lines vertically, but less lines horizontally. There's a variant for it, which is like packaged together with the font called input narrow. There's also input condensed and input compressed. I have tried all of them, but I decided to stick with just the default input mono. So on one side, you might think, well, the fact that every character is fatter, so bigger horizontally, that means that less things are going to fit on a single line, making things potentially hard, harder to read. But then I reconsidered, think about this, because the characters are usually more narrow, they also feel more crowded when you read it. So if you make the characters bigger horizontally, sure, they take up more space, but in that same fashion, you actually have more space to look through. They feel less crowded, and therefore it's actually easier to read and to tell things apart, because there's enough space for everything to look fully. Back with JetBrains Mono, this line, for example, would be maybe to like this. So the weight and brackets would end at this line. I am just assuming, I'm not actually sure. I'm actually forgetting the end. So, and this font takes more, but I think it is a benefit. Thanks to taking up more space, it's also easier to read. But then also it is vertically feels far more crowded. That's an interesting trade-off. It's a pretty cool font. The one thing I'm I don't particularly like is how the exclamation mark looks. I think it looks kind of off. But that's the only issue I have with this font, I guess. Now to the topic of this stream. Let me try to come up with an example for it. Let's imagine that you want to no, as usual, I have no clue how to make an example good. So you might sometimes use visual block mode to select something and then continue doing something. So you first turn on visual block mode, then go something like 5 lines down, do your change, then visual block mode 5 again, and you do another change. Then maybe here you need to replace these dots with something else, so 5J again, and so you end up doing this 5J, 5J, 5J business again and again, making it kind of annoying, which is why you might instead want to do norm and then do all of your actions all at once. Though this stream was about J and K. Lol. No. Maybe they are. I haven't specifically noticed them being different. We have J. That looks pretty, normal, actually. Do we have a K here? Yes. Yeah, J and K actually look pretty normal. So, I noticed that in a lot of actions, you keep on needing to repeat a count that you provide to J and K. Let's imagine this. You jump up to copy this line and then immediately come down to paste it. I feel like it's a fairly common situation that you might be in. Did I send the... Okay, yes, I did. Brilliant. And so, there are a lot of cases where you need to repeat a count to J and K to either go back or to repeat a certain action. And sometimes there is Control D and Control U, right, for scrolling. But sometimes using them is still too much, like maybe you don't want to scroll by half a screen. Maybe that's too much. So what you might do is probably just hold down J or K to start scrolling like this. And it feels kind of imperfect. It's a bit too little. Oh, you'll figure it out once I like explode my point, as I generally do. What if I told you that now the count that I pass into J and K is stored? So right now when I do J and K, they just work normally. But if I provide 2J, now all the following J's and K's will jump by 2. The count that I passed just once is now remembered. This continues being the case if I do 10J. Now every J and K will go by 10. This is the case also for operator pending mode, and well, visual, but that's a bit more obvious. So let's immediately start with an example. Currently, the stored count is J. So what I can do now is yj, and I copy this entire block. I did not need to provide the count, just did J, because the latest count is 10. And then I just press J, and I am at the end of what I just copied. And then I can paste, for example. Sure, it doesn't make for this specific block, but this is a very common situation where you want to yank something, then go to the end and paste it. Of course, you might know about the bracket marks. So you jump to this mark, and it will jump you to the end of the last operated on block of text. I always found it kind of, I don't know, I don't like pressing brackets. So I guess I could just change the hotkey for that, but I don't know. The idea of just using normal things, a normal motion, but more efficiently, is really exciting. Let's go to some documentation. Doesn't really matter which. I actually like reading NeoVim help pages in their entirety for fun. And here, the idea of small scrolling appears even stronger. American keyboards have ruined some shortcuts for us, for sure. Definitely, yeah. Especially considering just how much work lies on the pinky finger. It needs to press like 7 different keys, or even more probably. It is ridiculous. I mean, the left pinky isn't really better either. It needs to press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11. Okay, maybe 10, like we remove Alt, but still 10 keys, and that's only on the left side. On the right side, it's even worse. Who designed keyboards? And yet, one of the thumbs will never do anything. Like, what? What? How? Ah yes, let's make the strongest finger just press space. How about you just make a space smaller and add like more useful stuff on thumbs? Like, come on. Like, wouldn't, for example, enter being beside space make quite a lot of sense? Keyboards should be redesigned and changed the standards of. By the way, this font has a very nice looking bold variant. I like it a lot. It like stands out more than JetBrains Mono did. It is super fucking nice. It's amazing that we have layers, but nobody thought about cutting the spacebar into 3. Yes, exactly. And have like 100 keys on the home row. Exactly. Like, what the fuck? That is, like, come on, isn't that obvious? Okay, sure, maybe like for the average computer user, even more layers is confusing. I can see that. But like, just move the useful keys there. Like, move tab, enter, or escape, or literally anything. I mean, like, even shift being moved there would be a benefit, I think. Sometimes I ask myself if one day I will change my layout to something else, since I don't want to move HDKL. Being bound to Vim makes it kinda questionable to change your layout. It might still be worth it, honestly. Because think about it this way, how often is it a good idea to use like HDKL more than once at a time? Generally, you start using other motions once you need a bit more complex motion. So HDKL don't really matter as much. They can be scattered around because at the end of the day you will learn them, you will get used to them. I fight with not buying a Dactyl Maniform type keyboard weekly. What is that? Dactyl Maniform, goddamn. Hold up. Dactyl Maniform. What is that? Why is it in Russian? Why would it be in Russian? Wow, holy shit. Yes, same, indeed. This looks amazing, and I would love to have this as well. But then I don't have money, and I also live in Russia, where, like, good luck getting a keyboard as good as this. True. So true. So, in help pages, overall, when I read, I don't like making big jumps at a time. They kind of throw me off a bit. It makes more sense when I'm looking for something, and so I'm scrolling and I'm like, here it is, type of thing. But if I'm just reading something for the first time to try to like read it all and understand it, making jumps this huge disorients me. And so what I do is just hold down J and K to make like smaller scrolling. Now, with storing counts, I have the opportunity that I didn't have before. I can do something like 3J, and now I scroll bigger than the usual J and K, but not as huge as half a page. So I can still have like somewhat small scrolling without it being tiny and without it being huge. And I can just on the go change it, like, oh, let's actually make it 5 instead. And here I am. It is just that simple. I got the CSA Voyager. So how does it work? Let's go to my mappings for this. Well, here I use something that I didn't use before because I didn't understand it. Expression mappings. Expression mappings let you do some logic and some other stuff before returning the actual key sequence that you want to return. So essentially you bind it to a function that returns some sort of string, and that string basically becomes the hotkey. So look, for example, at something like this. Like, this is just a normal mapping that you bind to a string, and then it just interprets this as default Vim motions, right? So expression mappings work in a very similar way, except you get to use a function that returns this type of string. And this is very huge and very useful. So I bind it to this function. And/or is indeed very strange. So store and/or use count. The way that the count storing works is that if you provide the count, it is used and stored. This is what the and stands for. But if you don't provide a count, no new count is stored, and therefore you just use count, which is why the or. So basically, it either stores and uses count, or it stores or uses count, which is why it has this strange name. But count actually works very strangely in expression mappings. I still don't exactly understand it. Well, I guess I do enough, but it's very strange. So if you provide a count to this function, to this expression mapping, that count will still be used. And if you don't, you can provide your own count. But it's a bit weirder than that. So let's look through the code. If we provide a count at all, then we store it in this global variable so that we can access it later. And we just return the string that we passed, which in this case is either J or K. You can see that here I don't provide a count. I don't like do vim v count, right? Which is what you would expect. But it works very weirdly here. So if I did it like this, imagine that I provided count 2. I pressed 2J. What would happen is that it would turn into 22J. Because if we provide a count, it is remembered, and if you add some count, like again, it is as if you pressed it 2 times. So you can't just remove the count that you provided. It is going to be used regardless. Essentially, imagine that before this string, vim_v count is passed automatically. So if you try to provide your own count, it will get doubled, making it something like 22J, 33J, 44J, and etc. Oh, so expression are like a transformer who take an input and change the output with the other command. Yeah, pretty much. So this is why I don't specify vim_v count here explicitly, because that would double it. Vim_v count is added here automatically. However, if you don't provide a count, so you can see if count is 0, or rather if count is bigger than 0, then we do this, right? But if it is not bigger than 0, so if vim_v count is 0, then now this is like the strange different behavior. Now vim_v count is not passed, and so it isn't automatically added here. Well, I guess it is, but it doesn't do anything. So now you can provide your own count, which I do here by using the variable that we said before. And now this doesn't double because it only has the count that we provide, and it doesn't have the count like that existed before, I guess. It got provided automatically because it is 0. So this is kind of annoying to work with, because if you wanted to make an expression mapping to maybe like, oh, when I press some key, instead of repeating it once, repeat it twice, type of thing. This kind of behavior makes it a bit more difficult to implement more useful things with count because of this strange restriction. And worst thing is that we can't just do vimv count equals 0, so we could just provide our own count. You cannot do that. Vimv count is read-only. Vimv count is not really added, it just happens your input command was already your number and your move. Yeah, exactly. But when we look at it through the context of a function, it starts feeling weird here because it's almost like a hidden variable that gets appended or prepended to your output. It is unusual, I guess. Holy shit, I think I just... No, I did not figure out it. So I think there is some sort of way to remove count from a mapping. I believe that is Control U. I know this works in command mode, but I'm not sure if this will work in like normal mode or whatever other mode. It probably will not, and I'm pretty sure it won't, but this is a possibility. Print your what? I'm sure you'll see in the string there's already the command. But yet it's hidden. I would much prefer to specifically have to provide count myself, like use it if I want to and not use it if I don't want to. Especially considering that I can do that already, and yet. And so now I just map j and k to those functions, and voila, now they either store and use count or just use the previous count. You can see here I jumped by 7, and now I can continue jumping by 7. I want to select, boom. I want to delete, boom. This makes a lot of things far more repeatable, especially if you use visual block mode many times at a time for a single block. You don't have to keep on specifying the same count again and again and again. No need, you just use the count that you already have stored. Expression don't treat movement and move as different things. When they detect the move, they send the whole thing as input. So if you want to separate the move, you would have to do some string manipulation. So the thing about it is that this is actually false. Expression mappings don't pass the actual string. Matter of fact, they have no clue what you actually pressed. Maybe possibly you can pass it as an argument, but that's not like a default thing that you then have to handle. So they don't pass what you have actually pressed, but they do implicitly pass count. So it remembers the count, but it doesn't remember what you pressed. This is where the weird part comes in, because of it being like kind of hidden, I guess. It would be a different case if it specifically passed like keys that you pressed and then count, and then you would have to use them however you want, but that would be too good. So I guess I can't exactly expect it. Exactly, yeah. It is super weird. So this is why in a lot of places where I would want to use expression mappings, I cannot, and have to basically emulate literal keys being sent instead. So here I have GM. It is the same as G capital M, but it doesn't expect from you a full percentage, and instead just takes the first number that you put in and multiply it by 10. And here I'm doing math on the count that you provide and doing feed keys on it. So I cannot use an expression mapping here. I cannot just decide what count that I want. Maybe I can actually in this specific case, because maybe I just add 0 and that will be like magically correct. Let's go to a different example. Here, my mapping to make command mode take a count more correctly. I also cannot use expression mappings here, even though I would prefer to. After a function that use a global variable to pick some info account are always annoying. I super agree, yeah. And bad languages like AutoHotkey v1, Vim script, shells, but those are like expected to be bad languages. They all do that, I assume, because it's easier to implement, but it's kind of annoying to work with sometimes. This is what feed keys is, by the way, because I'm sure somebody will have this question. It's probably my most favorite abstraction function that I've made. It is so incredibly useful. I use it in a lot of places, as you can see here. Here I can't use expression mapping simply because... Actually, maybe I can. Yeah, I probably can, for what it's worth. I should be able to, but I guess I just don't. Kind of variable make me remember of processor register in the function call, but Lua is not assembly in last news. So true. Lua might as well be assembly, the way I hate it. By the way, I think I shared this already. I made a whole rant, a whole article as a GitHub gist about why I hate Lua, because if you've been watching me for some time, you might know how infamous I am for hating Lua. And I finally put all of my thoughts on paper, all together, where I express why I hate this language, even though it's unfortunately my most used language. Then fish shell, then rust, I think. Yeah, pretty sure. I use Lua like significantly more because of how much I configure NeoVim. I mean, look at the topics for today's stream. All of them, except this, I guess, are about NeoVim. Look at my past streams, they're usually about NeoVim. I'm not like a NeoVim exclusive channel, I just happen to do so much NeoVim configuration lately that the topics just keep on compiling. So unsurprisingly, making J and K store count can introduce some weird behavior. I currently only encountered one thing that was weird about it. Let's go to the plugin various text objects. It provides a lot of text objects for operator pending mode and visual mode. So the way that NeoVim Fish, that's such a niche subject, it absolutely is, yeah. For some odd reason, I did decide to go the more normal route and go like, I don't know, learn Python and get a job faster. Now I have to do some really weird bullshit that is hyper specific. Ah yes, let me fucking get good at Vim script. What? So, operator pending mode expects a singular motion. How exactly you get that motion to be singular is a whole other question, and it doesn't really matter. And so, various text objects provides you a thingy that, long story short, the way that operator pending mode works, behind the scenes is actually just selects the area in visual mode. And that's how the operator pending mode works. So the mode that happens after you press an operator, just press D. Now I am in operator pending mode. Let me actually do this so you can see. So I press D. Now, after the operator, it is pending for a motion for you to press, or a text object. So when you do something like J behind the scenes, it actually selects the two lines in visual mode and then executes D on it. I know it's off topic, but is there a way in Fish to have a normal up arrow history? Let's try to search from the start of the line. So the usual history happens if your command line is empty, and now you just use history when you press up and down. But if you type in something, anything, now it searches by match, which is a behavior I like a lot, but there are also mappings that specifically only go back in history that you're going to be able to find in the documentation. So I use these text objects that various text objects provides to implement my own text object for an operation that happens very commonly. Let's go here, for example. How would I delete this entire mapping? Whoops, wrong hotkey. This entire mapping. Now that I have access to the text object of inside indentation, I am almost there. All I have to do is now go down, and you can probably already see the issue, then O, and go up. And now I have selected everything. As I just explained, operator pending mode behind the scenes just selects things in visual mode. And this is what you can use to implement your own text objects. You just have to figure out how to select this thing in visual mode consistently. And then I do D, blammo. So I created my own text object that essentially does VII OK. But now with my change of J and K storing count, this won't necessarily work correctly. Let's imagine I have like 3 being the count that I stored. Now I do VII, J, I'm already very wrong, OK. And now this is just incorrect. That's not what I wanted to catch. Generally, let's go to the mapping that I have for visual mode. Eventually we're gonna get there. Here we are. Yeah, so if you just use like a string here in visual mode, this works. How do I explain this the best? So basically, when you provide just a normal string as your right hand side for the mapping, it does not use any remaps. So the fact they changed J and K does not matter here. It is not interpreted as my remap. It just uses the default J and K, so you can forget about the count. Nothing changes here. So first I call the command for select indentation, and then I just move my cursor down and up using default binds, so the stored count does not matter here. So basically this. But count the motions that we need to make. So first we make select in visual mode the indentation. This is one motion. Second motion, third motion, fourth motion. This is okay in visual mode because, yeah, you can make as many motions as you want because the visual mode collects everything. But when you want to make this into an operator pending mode mapping into a text object, you cannot do it like this anymore. You cannot just decide to map it to this. It will no longer work. It will just grab the indentation as the text object and then will just execute these mappings after the operation. So what will happen is that it will delete inside the indentation and then do OK. This is basically what will happen. So we need to somehow combine both of these into a singular motion. Let's go to... Let's go to pending. You can use the normal command to collect a bunch of things, like you can see here, into a singular motion, because a single command call in like command mode collects all the motions, because we're using the normal command, into a single motion, which is really great. But you also have to provide visual mode at the start. So this is how text objects work overall. They start visual mode, select what you want to select, and boom, thanks to the normal command, this is now a singular motion and will work for operator pending mode. So this is great, and we provide the exclamation mark to make all of these mappings not care about their remapping. So all of these are default, and J and K here will not care about the count. So this is okay, and super works. But, and you can already see them. Oh, interesting, my cursor is now like blank. So the issue with this, like this basically, is that I need to combine two very different things. I need to either combine II, which is my mapping for select indentation, as you can see from here, press II, now I select indentation. This is my remapping. So I could make a mapping with remap equals true to make this be interpreted with what it is remapped to, with what is my mapping. So that when I press II, it actually interprets it as the select indentation text object. Okay, that's great. But then I need to, in the same command, make it so J and K are not interpreted as remaps. And that kind of imbalance makes things very difficult. But I arrived at a solution. So you can't nest commands into each other. So you can't call, you can't like call, oh, let's execute normal, and then inside of normal, let's call this command that selects indentation and then all the other keys after. You cannot do that, and you can't also just call multiple normal commands, because then they are not all together a single motion. There are three separate motions once again. But you can call a single command mode command that calls Lua, requires and does this indentation, and then inside calls normal with these things. This you can do. This work, we just use semicolon to separate the statements, or expressions, I guess. And now this works because this is a singular command that unifies all the motions that you want to take. And voila, congratulations. This actually works. So now when I do DAM, this selects the correct thing that I wanted. Then DA capital M, blammo. So this is actually very powerful. Essentially, you just can do whatever Lua code that you want here, selecting whatever hyperspecific thing that you want, and this will be collected into a singular motion and will work for operator pending mode. About this mapping, in NeoVim 0.10 we finally have default commenting functionality. You can now press something like GCC to comment the current line, or GC and then whatever motion. So there's also a text, an operator for commenting, and you can also press let's comment something. You can now press GC to uncomment a comment block. This is really amazing, super great to finally have in default functionality. However, I don't like pressing GC. It feels kind of off, it feels kind of and I had GS untaken because the default thing of what GS does is sleeps. You can press something like 5GS and it will make NeoVim do nothing for 5 seconds. It's even more hilarious that there's also a command mode command for this anyway, so why is there a default mapping for it? It is super strange. In other words, GS you can very easily remap to whatever else you want, which is exactly what I wanted to do with commenting. However, once I looked at GC, so all these mappings, they just map to a string. These do not care about the remappings. In other words, if you try to put a remap here, it will not be interpreted as a remap, just as a default option, like default mapping, like built into NeoVim type thing. Even though GC is now built into NeoVim, it is not a default mapping, strangely. What is the case instead is that it is added as a config type thing, which you can see here in Vim defaults. That is where it is mapped. So it is not default functionality, it is mapped in a default config, I guess you could say. So if you just try to map GS to GC, this will not work. Which sucks. So first of all, whenever you want to figure out how to remap something to something and it doesn't work how you expect, use the map command and pass what you're looking for to see what that GC in this case is actually mapped to. Here I was able to figure out, I see. So this is not built into the actual functionality of the editor. This is in the default config for the editor. Then I was able to search for vim slash defaults. Let's actually go and do that. And we might be able to find it. No. Let's copy this path and go edit it. Oh, no, not like that. Like this. And here we get to basically the default config that actually defines all of these GC mappings that you now have by default in NeoVim 0.10. So what you could do is to just copy this function and put it into your config if you wanted to remap something else to do that kind of action. Or what I decided to do, just specify remap equals true to make GC be interpreted as its mapping, because it is now a mapping rather than a default functionality. So with remap equals true, this now works. But as I already explained from my making a custom text object thing, you can't always just do remap true, because that might make other mappings pop up when you don't actually want them to. So if I wanted to make GS be GCJ, now I can't use remap because that will use J with a count, which I might not necessarily want. And then, yes, I would have to use the text object as it's mapped in that file. So map, super useful. It's also useful when overall you want to see maybe all the normal mappings. You can look at all of them. Especially useful if you are using a distro and you want to see all the mappings at once that are defined for it. Also all the plugins. It includes buffer local mappings as well. So very useful. And then CMap for command mode. Exclamation map. Thought so. Map exclamation. So this is an exception. So yeah, very useful. And that is how I was able to figure out how to remap GS to be GC. So now I can use GSS, GS4 down, GS4 down, GS, blammo. I'm recharging. So I went on a bigger streak of remapping things. So something as commonly used as the commenting operator, yeah, it makes sense to be on something more accessible. I picked GS because it's one of the mappings that don't actually do anything useful. And there are a lot of key combinations in Vim that either don't do anything useful or don't do anything at all, which you can use for your own mappings. Instead of having to use leader for goddamn everything, the more commonly used actions you can actually move to something like GS, which is what I did. GV, something that lets you select the previous visual selection. GV is kind of annoying to press. You have to press 2 keys with the same finger. It's kind of sucky. Well, I just remapped it to GA. And now I can just press GA and that reselects the previous selection. Just use my last money to buy a cake that looks exactly like a cake. What? I love but not it. Oh, fuck, that really sucks. Cakes are, well, a lie. Oftentimes, they may look the same, and then, like, yeah, this super sucks. There's a very infamous Russian cake. I don't remember its name, though. And it's like Russian roulette in the way that it might absolutely suck or be amazing. And it looks the exact fucking same. Let me go open the window. So yeah, I have at least 3.7 condolences for you, because that really sucks. So GA is way easier to press for an action that you might be using very often. Thing is, if you map it to correct things, it will work in multiple modes, like for example operator pending mode. I don't think GV exists in operator pending mode, but let's check. No, it does not. It does not exist. So, not with this specific example, but in other stuff, like the... Where were we? Like the GC text object for comments. Like, for example, the reason why GS works, or by default GC, is because GC is a text object for a comment block. So that's how it works. And by remapping to it, you can also use it in operator pending mode, so it's very powerful. And same thing will apply to your other remaps that you might want. So another thing that I remapped, wait, no, let's do like this. Oh, here we go. I also remapped GN and G capital N, which I didn't even know existed. So let's search for feed keys. I moved to this match, and now by default you can press GN to select the match in visual mode. So you can, for example, delete it, or you can be more direct and say DGN, and that will delete the current search match, or CGN to change it. Then you change it to something else, and you press dot to change the next match as well. Very useful, and I used to use it a lot. So yeah, when you remap to something a bit nicer to press, which is G dot for me, this still super applies. I can do G dot and get selected, DG dot, I can delete it, etc. So you can map to something more convenient to press without having to trade off functionality that you might want, which is super nice. Yeah, this really sucks for sure. Cakes are... they're like, yeah, Russian roulette. They might really suck without you ever really knowing if they will. Which is why I usually prefer other types of sweets that you can trust more easily to be good. Like chocolate, for example. Especially if I've bought it before. It's probably going to be good. I want to show you an even more kind of crazy idea. The thing about mappings that start with G is that G is kinda like an operator. Kinda? Not exactly. So if you look at all of the... Did you mean the Ptichye Moloko cake? Holy fuck, how do you know that? Are you Russian? But no. I don't think I've ever tried that. Maybe I just didn't realize that it was Ptichye Moloko. Q, W, E, R, T, U, I, O, P, all of these keys in default Vim immediately do something as you press them. So making some mapping, for example, on OF or something, it doesn't really work. Because by default you press O and it immediately springs into action. It immediately does the action that you want. If you mapped something to OF, now once you press O, it won't immediately add this new line. It will wait for your next input. If it is F, then it will execute your mapping, but if it is anything else, then it will just continue on normally. But while this is an approach that some people use, I don't recommend it, because now anytime you press O, you have basically a delay. Either you have to think ahead and just start using your other motions, but you won't get visual feedback immediately like you do by default. So mapping to something like OF doesn't really make sense, especially if you want to just start typing F. But maybe just O is a bad default, but something like Q maybe would make more sense, but still. I guess, yeah, Q super makes sense, considering that it expects another character anyway before doing anything. I'm the sneaky boy. How interesting, especially with you being named John. Does Vim care or allow for multiple key hints, like hitting O and F at the same time to launch? By the way, you can. You super can make this functionality, which is hilarious. But no, I'm pretty sure it's not like made for that, to be able to like take two at the same time. It is specifically sequential. But not all of the keys immediately do some action. Some of them are D, C, Y, G, Z, and something else that I'm forgetting. Or maybe not. I guess F, but remapping F and T, it's kind of a bad idea. Simply because of how they work. They want you to press a character that you want to search for, so you probably don't want to make a mapping like F something, right? I love the multi-hit stuff on my keyboard. Same, yes. I used to type like these on my home row by hitting 2 or 3 keys at once. We're actually gonna get to that, if I don't forget. Because this is very, very exciting. So the magic of why G works really well for your own remaps to like default things is because it is okay in both normal and visual mode. Because regardless if you're in visual or in normal mode, once you press G, nothing happens yet. It's not meant to, because it expects another character from you. However, something like D works differently in normal and visual mode. If you press D in normal mode, nothing happens yet as well. But if you press D in visual mode, then immediately something happens. So that means that G and also Z work really well for remapping stuff that is supposed to work exactly the same in normal and visual mode. Because in normal mode, we do GN, it immediately does something. If in visual, we press GN, it also immediately does something. Although, usually less useful. And you cannot really do that with something like D. If we remapped D something in visual mode, now instead of immediately doing the action, it would start waiting for us to press another key. But what this means is that for any actions that you will ever only execute in normal mode, you have a lot more options for more accessible key maps. DC, for example, in normal mode does nothing. In visual mode, it does do something. It deletes and then starts waiting for C because now you're in normal mode. So you have so many options for easily accessible key maps that are not taken by NeoVim for normal mode. D plus a lot of the keys that currently do nothing. C for the same exact thing, and Y technically, although I don't think it's very convenient to press, so I don't like it that much. And I recently made use of this. Here. CC is technically taken, and it does do something, but is exactly equivalent to pressing capital S, which I prefer much more. So now CC does a certain action that I will only ever want to execute in normal mode. DR does nothing. Well, now it does, but that's because I remapped it. Only in normal mode, DR does something. Not really gonna go into what these specific mappings now do, but basically keep in mind that you actually have a lot of very easily pressable, accessible mappings to use for your common actions that you might want to take. So while leader mappings like leader and then something make a lot of sense usually, and they're easier to make mnemonics things with, you don't immediately have to go for leader mappings. Not necessarily, because you have so many options, especially in normal mode, for things that are untaken. DQ does nothing, DR does nothing, DY does nothing. I'll continue on. DU, I believe, does nothing. DI, DO. Oh, DI does something. It like expects a text object, obviously. DP, DS, although that's usually taken up by the NeoVim Surround plugin. D semicolon, D colon, D apostrophe, D, etc. I disagree. It depends. For something like Telescope, it sometimes takes considerably noticeable time to load, and here 3 keys actually feel better, because by the time you press them, you have already trained your brain into putting in more effort, and so the recoil from waiting for it to load is lesser. But something that you want to do a bit more immediately, 2 keys over 3 keys, can be super better. This is YouTube, not a terminal. In what terminal are you typing in yes? What other ones did I remap? It's probably in my notes, aren't they? I guess not. Holy fuck. What? Repeatedly output a line with all this specified. Or why? What? Something else. Huh. You'll have to explain what that does. I would usually just look into it a bit more and read the man page, but like, I have my tasks to talk about, you know? Let me try to remember what other things I remap to D something. Let's use this thingy, which in Vim regex means basically the word that I'm going to input has to be not inside of another word. And then D something, and then it ends. DM. I read man pages for fun, and I oftentimes want to open them in NeoVim, which you can do, by the way, if you didn't know. So we can do something like RG, blammo, it opens the man page inside of NeoVim for me to read. And especially so, I have a thing for help, which is basically the same thing. D comma, and now I can just enter the help page that I want to read. For example, motion.txt, and blammo, I go here immediately. Considering just how often I use this makes a lot of sense to make an easier mapping too. And considering that also, I will only ever want to execute this from normal mode, I don't need to use G or Z. So I use D here. I can also use C instead of D for these two maps. So this is super fucking convenient. Let's search for what else. Oh yeah, also I mapped DP and D capital P. So instead of DDP to move a line over the next line, I can just do DP. Things like that you have to your advantage to completely use. My mind is slowly melting because I recently played Xenoblade again, and the Incredible Ost is on repeat in my head. I feel you so much, but for me, it is with basically always Necro Trap. I love it so much. Recently came across this track, and holy shit, it's so good. God, I love Terrorism Core. Kinda. Necro Trap has the vibe of terrorism very often, and it is very enjoyable because it expresses absolute rage, anger, and like, I guess, mental instability in a very artsy way. Necro Trap and Trap Metal let me express the anger that I feel at the world every day that no other genre of music can let me do. Death metal and stuff like that also slap, but they feel usually less dynamic, which I dislike. I don't know if I already mentioned it, but have you tried Baroque metal? Nope, I have not. I don't think you've mentioned this before. So what I like about necro trap and trap metal is that they're very, very active. They jump around all over the place, and there's constant stimulation. So it's basically my way to overstimulate myself to drown out the difficulties of the world. It's very good. All right. Isn't that kind of heavy? Let's see if I have any more of these like pure D something things. DU is an interesting thingy. Let's imagine you do if condition, and then now you want to basically put this bracket over GJ, but also remove this current line. This is a situation that happens very, very commonly. So what you might have to do is DDP. This is a bit too much, so I made it so DU deletes the two lines, but only keeps the second line in my default register, so that I can just paste it where I want. This is useful if I want to put multiple lines into it. But if I just want to add this line, leader DI does that for me. And it is a leader mapping for kind of close to no reason, simply because it's a very old one. So I was going for leader mappings a lot as well. But I could move it to D something, and that would work just as well. YouTube chat is the terminal. So true. Also, that PFP fucking slaps. What is that? Goes so hard. Did you know that you can chain searches? Let's say I want to jump to neovim buff get name, but the one that goes before open link in instance. The way to go about it is usually jumping to open link on instance and then jumping backwards into neovim buff get name, right? More realistically, the way that you would probably do it is immediately jump to neovim buff get name and then press N a billion fucking times. Where were we? Here we are. See, I don't really like breakcore. It overstimulates, not in a way that I enjoy. It overstimulates by overloading just a lot of stuff all at once. While Necrotrap does still like overstimulate, but not really by overloading. It still moves around very dynamically and like very beautifully. Instead of just trying to put as much shit as possible into this same thing. It's kind of hard to explain, but I've tried listening to breakcore and it wasn't really my thing. The track is the extreme of unenjoyable overloading. It's the purpose of the track, yeah, which is why I appreciate that it exists. I appreciate that the genre exists, although it's not for me. The greatest thing about music is that it's so fucking different that everyone can find something that fits exactly them. It's amazing. So you can change searches. Let's search for open link, but now instead of pressing enter, let's enter an offset operator that I've talked about previously, so I'm not going to elaborate on what that is. And now the offset operator is the semicolon that now expects another search. Now I can do nvim buff get name, right? And when I press enter, I will go here. So essentially, with this type of search, we make sure that we get to new buff get name that is right before, or rather the first before open link in instance. In the context of the game, it makes sense. Cool. Matter of fact, we don't have to stop at 2. We can continue going. Now we can like xdg open. So we searched for xdg open that is effectively between neovim buff get name and open link. You can probably guess that we can continue going. Now we found, and that is up then open link, down then buff get name, and down then xdg open. So this is very fucking specific. And the cool thing about this is that search harps in my plugin harp neovim actually supports this. I didn't think of it when designing it, but it just happens to also support this, which is in theory hyper fucking powerful, because you can specify searches in an easier way, this kind of way, rather than trying to match this specific end via a more complicated pattern. So this fucking slaps. When we press enter, boom, we are now on this end. The extra usefulness for this is that if you do d search, and then search for end, you will end up just before this end. You can of course just press Ctrl G to go to the next one, and this will work. As you can see, I've talked about this previously on stream, but let's just try to use a different solution. We just search for open link first, and then chain it with end. And now we immediately end up at here. This is a bit more useful if we try to use a search for something that we can't yet see. So I want to delete until something that I know is in the file. So options, and after that auto write, and we do that. So this is how search chaining can be very useful. As you could see, it also like shows us the match of the thing that we know exists, and now we can actually look for what we're trying to match rather than having to first move here to begin with. So in theory, very powerful. Fun fact, I didn't write this. It was completely fucking by ChatGPT. Although now I probably know enough Vim script to be able to write this myself. Probably, maybe. But yeah, this is my mapping to go to a random line in the file. Why do I have it? Because I can't decide what video to watch. And Z question mark can let can decide for me, which is pretty nice. Alright, on to the next thing. When you are in the command mode, you can press tab to complete your match. Complete from what you typed in into something. Voila! Oh, sorry. But I don't like pressing tab. The default key for tab is kinda annoying. And although I like my remap for tab, I have to press caps lock F for tab. It's pretty good, but still I don't like pressing tab, really. When I complete stuff, in basically every place, in my shell, in NeoVim, and anywhere that I can make it behave that way, I instead press Alt semicolon. It is basically a very strong convention in my configs. Oh, also in Rofi. So what I wanted to do is make Alt semicolon complete here as well, which I was able to do. So usually, why would that ever be like anything interesting even? Just go to your command mappings and just add, oh, when I press Alt semicolon, actually you should mean tab. And here you go, right? No, wrong, actually. Tab is not actually a default thing. Let's search for command mode tab. You would think that you would be able to just, this is, by the way, this is the wrong thing. C tab. Yeah, this. You would think you would just be able to map to it, but no, you cannot. And so I thought, oh, maybe it is mapped like this. Let's look at it. What? It's not mapped. Maybe we need to be specific and say Control I. What? So it's not even a mapping. It doesn't seem to be a default mapping, and it doesn't seem to be a default configuration. So you can't just map it to it directly, which was wild to me, because like, what the fuck? Turns out you have to use the wild charm option to set this mapping. And you can't just say, oh, let it be Alt semicolon. You can't be convenient like that. It doesn't support all the mappings that NeoVim generally does. It only supports keys and special keys that you can express with their ASCII code. A lot of control plus key type of sequences can be expressed via their numbers. How can you know that? Call echo char 2 and r, and now you can provide, it's better to use specifically double quotes, by the way. And now you can specify something like Control C. When you press enter, it will show you 60, which I'm pretty sure is wrong, by the way. Let me think. No, it should be correct. Okay, well, oh, right. Okay, yeah, I did do this wrong. You have to specify backslash if you want to get the number of a control plus something character. You have to use backslash so that you can use this convenient syntax. Another way of doing it is that if you press Control Q and then Control C, then you can specify the actual character. So let's execute this. We get 3, which does sound correct. So if you want to press Control C instead of tab, this is what you would do. You would set wild charm to 3, and this will mean Control C. But if you want to use the more convenient syntax without having to use Control Q, you have to do backslash Control C and basically use the usual syntax that you would use to specify some sort of key map. Once you press enter, you see 3 once again. Important to notice, if you see 92 here, that means that it doesn't exist. So if I try to see alt semicolon, I'll see, well, I guess this. So if you see 128 or 92, it means that it doesn't exist. So there are only a few, like Control plus C usually, mappings that can be expressed with a number. I think what I meant by yeah, so if you see 92, that is because you used single quotes, and in this case the backslash is interpreted literally. Char2number actually expects a singular character and turns it into its decimal number. If you use single quotes, it interprets this string literally, meaning it just takes the first character that it can see in this string and return the ASCII number of it, and the ASCII number of backslash is 92, which is why you should be using double quotes here. I am trying to explain how to remap tab to something else for completing in command mode. So here, if you see 128, that means that it basically maxed out on the amount of numbers that it can interpret, I think. Let's try something else just to be sure. Let's insert, Control Q X D9, Control Q U D9E, because I hate pressing tab. Okay, so yeah, so it can indeed interpret like literally any number, and here it's displaying us the decimal number of the Amogus character. So I'm assuming what is the case for why it's displaying 128 here is because capital A is 128, although I'm not sure about that. Let's try C instead. Okay, yeah, so it maxes out for some reason, I guess. Kind of like an error message. Basically, I cannot interpret this, this doesn't exist. Interesting. So basically, you cannot directly remap something like alt semicolon to complete in command mode, and yet I have it. How do I have it? So first you map to some control sequence that does exist, which you can check with char2number, and I mapped it to Control L. Then let's search for it. In command mode, I map alt semicolon to Control L. So when I press alt semicolon, it is interpreted as Control L in normal mode, and it uses the wildcharm option to understand, Control L should complete the match. And this is how I was able to remap it. Now it feels far better. So yeah, as I explained a bit earlier, alt semicolon I use in basically every place where I can complete. It's a very strong convention in my config, and I don't like pressing tab. I promised to talk about home row mods. So John in chat mentioned how they can press multiple keys at once to turn them into other keys. The remapping program that I use, which is XRemap, also has this functionality of basically if you hold down something, that it becomes a modifier, and if you press it by itself, it is just a key. It also has this functionality. However, what I noticed is that it is noticeable. When I just press some key by itself, the delay that exists there is noticeable. It's workable, kinda, but it's still noticeable. So it's not like you have to wait a second or something for it to turn into a normal key. No, not really, but still, it is noticeably kind of I tried a lot of different keys that I could use as modifiers or keys, and none of them really worked. Which sucks. Which is why, instead of trying to use some key as a modifier, I just use caps lock plus a bunch of different keys to turn them into special characters. So caps lock U I O H J K L M comma dot slash, and for some of them I can also press caps lock alt and then U M, I guess not here, so caps lock alt dot caps lock alt slash. So this is how I insert all of my special characters. Also caps lock square brackets turns into normal brackets. I've always hated how they are shift and 90. I find that absolutely fucking ridiculous. And now they're far nicer, so I don't have to reach for the number row anymore to insert special characters, and they end up being way quicker and faster to insert. Like for example, this is now way faster than trying to move my hands all the way to the number row. And also numbers I can insert without reaching for the number row. Right super or meta or Windows key, F D S R E W V C X A, which I know is a very, very, very strange numpad. First of all, it's reversed. Second of all, the first three numbers are on the middle row, the second three numbers are higher, and the third three numbers are lower. And then A is 0. It is very strange for sure, and I'm still kind of getting used to it, but I enjoy it the most. It feels very good, especially comparing to having to reach for the number row. It's amazing. Like, doing this, even though I have to press an extra modifier, ends up feeling way better than having to reach all the way to the number row. I do this thanks to XRemap once again. There is most likely a way to do this on the like keyboard hardware level, but maybe possibly not with my keyboard, because it's not like QMK or whatever, just a normal ass keyboard. So yeah. yeah, and everything else here we're going to leave for the next stream. So thanks for watching, everyone. Join my Discord server. The link is in